In this era of deep complexity,
He's a friend of CNN. That's why nobody watches CNN anymore, because they have no credibility.
beyond the edges of black or white,
America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing!
it's time to be notionally accurate.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
Here are your hosts, Captain Kirk and some guy named Jason.
Welcome one and all to the 20th episode of the Notionally Accurate podcast, produced live right here at the One Man's Burden Studios in my undisclosed compound, located in the Florida swampland of Silicon Valley. My name is Captain Kirk, and I'll be your affable host. With another rambunctious week of chaos in the news, some guy named Jason and I muse over the continuing decay of the Democrat Party. What is their identity? AOC and Bernie Sanders held a wine fest in Denver as President Trump further maneuvered to deport criminal illegal aliens from the U.S. under the Alien Enemies Act. What is the Alien Enemies Act? Stay tuned as we dive into the tug and pull between the executive and judicial branches, while Congress twiddles their thumbs on the sideline. Who wins out? Time will tell. The Biden-era CPB-1 app that was intended to assist illegal immigrants crossing the border has been totally switched around by the Trump administration, and it's now a deportation mechanism. Genius. Speaking of Denver, a local left-wing media outlet known as 9 News, KUSA TV, is celebrating an inconvenient anniversary. Their Antifa-friendly reporter named Jeremy Hohola has praised Jorge Gonzalez, a Chicano activist on tape advocating for murdering police officers, doxed a local activist running for city council. His reason? According to Jeremy Hohola, it was because he was angry that the candidate was trolling him, even though the evidence of such was weak or non-existent. He eventually deleted his post showing the candidate's address, a post he admitted would lead to accusations of doxing after some backlash. But rather than face the heat, he fled Twitter in 2023, never to return. Stay tuned for future episodes of Notionally Accurate, where we'll conduct a controlled demolition of 9 News and their left-wing staff. The anti-Musk violence calling itself the Tesla takedown movement is uncovered as some guy named Jason and I highlight the shady Soros-funded group using the moniker Indivisible. Who leads the outfit? We name names on this episode, specifically husband-wife left-wing activists Ezra Levin and Leah Greenberg. Meanwhile, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer spills the beans about the Democrats' effort to disrupt Republican town halls while throwing a tantrum on The View. His ass can't be primaried fast enough. The Tesla takedown violence is amplified as Greenpeace loses its lawsuit against Energy Transfer for their actions during the Standing Rock protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline. And what Notionally Accurate episode is complete without a mention of another Columbia University affiliate. I watched The Apprentice recently, the movie about Donald Trump's upbringing in the 70s and the 80s. I can't say I was impressed, other than by Jeremy Strong's portrayal of Roy Cohn. Roger Stone, who knew Cohn, introduced to Trump by Cohn, recommended an Oscar for the performance. Otherwise, not impressed with Sebastian Stan's imitation of Trump. Few glimpses of it showed well, but was too few. The movie was a second-by-second PDS fest to attack Trump. I know that the Trump 2024 campaign sued to prevent it from being released. Honestly, I don't think anyone who didn't already know about Trump and watched this dreck passed out before the movie ramps up to the hyperbole. It took me 2 days to finish. I should have let my rental run out instead. Being a curious guy, I looked up who made this disaster, and it was directed by a guy I've never heard of, and written by Gabriel Sherman. Again, curious man that I am, I looked at his alma mater. Color me surprised. Columbia. I don't find these connections, people. These connections find me.
These past few weeks, we seem to be starting our show with whoever's getting the most whoopings during the week. And obviously, this past week, the person who's been getting the most whoopings, Elon Musk. He's getting barbecued out there.
Absolutely roasted. And for what? Trying to make the government more efficient? Trying to save us a couple bucks? I mean, not quite sure what the hubbub's about, but let's dive into it.
Well, I tell you what he's doing. You know why people are upset? He's cutting into paychecks. That's what he's doing. And some of it is justified. I mean, some of the outrage, I think, okay, yeah, it's justified. I can see how you do an action that is going to affect a lot of people. Some of it's going to be negative, and you go back and fix whatever mistakes you made or do whatever you have to do to not have it be as damaging as it is. But these things have to get done. Our government's a bloated carcass. we have to get rid of this stuff. And he's the one that is brave enough and has the ability to do it, to take all this criticism. What's interesting about Musk is that he is, to a certain degree, he's a lot like Trump in the fact that these two gentlemen are probably so unique in the fact that they have the ability to take on this kind of criticism. They have the ability to weather the storm of public discourse and protests and whatever, but they have the financial and the mental and the emotional stability to be able to handle something like this.
The endurance of these two, who are, maybe 25 plus years apart in age, the similarity of their endurance is pretty remarkable. And this is such a novel idea, bringing in Doge, bringing in these experts to look under the hood and try, just on the surface, make government more efficient, cancel these unnecessary contracts. It's a sight to behold, really. It's a very interesting time to be alive, having something this scale be even attempted. And we see the reaction to that.
And honestly, the people reacting the most extreme are the ones, and I've said it before, that those are the ones you really have to watch out for. Those are the ones, especially, and I'm not talking about John Q. Public, who he's been working for the government, and now he's losing his job and he doesn't know. I'm talking about congressmen and senators who are so upset about what's happening that they're, in a way, they're trying to defend waste. They're trying to defend, crime, and they're the ones you have to watch out for. And the American government cannot be all things to all people. It just can't be.
And we see Bernie Sanders and AOC down in Denver. They're gloating about how big the rally was. Bernie's doing his, I hate the oligarchs and the billionaires and the millionaires trying to tell us how to run this government. But I don't mind our oligarchs. I'm Saban, Tom Steyer, George Soros. They're fine people. I had lunch with them last week.
And just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, that was not a edited voice of Bernie Sanders. That was actually our Captain Kirk, who I think it's a dead-on impression of Bernie Sanders, by the way. Dead on. Good job. Can you do?
Well, thank you. The check's in the mail.
Can you do AOC now?
Give me I'm a communist.
They had to amend the Constitution of the United States to make sure Roosevelt did not get reelected.
How's that?
Wow, that was good. That was great. That was dead on too. That was a good job on that one. That's awesome. No, and that's interesting with the Democratic response to this, and we've been talking about this for weeks, is the identity now of the Democrats. Because the Democrats don't know how they protest. They immediately protest. They go from protesting to destruction pretty quickly. But they always go to protest. And by protest, lighting cars on fire. That's an old gimmick from, the Democrats have been doing that one for years, is lighting cars on fire. But it's being proved that it's being funded by, these protests are being funded by NGOs, correct?
So the NGOs, which are sponsoring these protests, are being funded by the oligarchs and the billionaires. Particularly one group called Indivisible, which first sprouted up around 2017 or so, but is a cutout of the George Soros Open Society Foundation, like Media Matters and all these other outfits. All the money goes through different charities, different other NGOs, and then it makes its way into Indivisible.
Here to discuss the Indivisible project is co-founder Ezra Levin. Ezra, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So this started as a Google document.
That's right. It was just a Google Doc that we put up with an embarrassing number of typos, but we got a lot of those fixed. And we have just been absolutely blown away by the response. The fundamental idea behind the Google Doc is that Donald Trump's agenda doesn't depend on Donald Trump. It depends on whether or not individual members of Congress, 2 senators and your representative, choose to resist or choose to rubber stamp. So the guide is all about how you can make your voice heard as a constituent.
And they're the ones that are sponsoring this Tesla takedown of tanking the stock, trying to make it so even owning a Tesla is a crime, all to hurt Musk because he's working with Doge. And who are the leaders of Indivisible? Ezra Levin and Leah Greenberg, who are, at this point, 10 years into their political activism, worked with a couple of Democrats on the Hill. I know Greenberg married Levin, so they're husband and wife activists, a wonderful love story there. And they're the ones that are leading the national anti-Tesla protest.
You are being accused on the right of getting funding from George Soros.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
No, there's no truth to it. Look, as of Sunday, I'm executive director. Nobody has received a paycheck, though. This has been an entirely volunteer effort, working out of living rooms and in the nights, in the weekends, on sick days that people take. It is amazing how they're just lies just come out there. And I think it's a lot easier and more convenient to believe that somehow somebody's pulling the strings on this. But in reality, this is an organic, locally led movement.
Well, and then you have the illustrious Tim Walz and his statements. And I don't understand. So they said he was at a town hall, but it looks like he's doing like a stand-up set. Like, what kind of town hall is that?
Saying on my phone, I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone, they've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day.
Everything he says, everyone laughs. It's very odd.
225 and dropping. So.
But then, so he made the jokes about, hopes an American company's stock burns. All right.
And if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, and take out, just telling you.
Okay, that's not good optics, by the way, Tim. So then he goes out and gives a half-assed apology.
This guy bugs me in a way that is probably unhealthy. And but I have to be careful about being a smartass. I was making a joke. These people have no sense of humor. They are the most literal people. But my point was they're all mad, and I, said something I didn't, probably shouldn't have about a company. He is. Agree. They're all butthurt about the Tesla thing,
which is not even a really good apology. But it shows that the Democrats, they don't know if they can't protest. They don't know what to do. They have to pick something to protest against.
So real quick on the Tim Walz Tesla remarks, the Minnesota pension plans, millions of dollars are invested in Tesla stock. So every time he criticizes Tesla, every time the stock goes down, you're hurting Minnesota pensioners. Now, they might not care. They might not even know, but.
Yeah, but he got big laughs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and really, if you're a stand-up comedian, aren't laughs the most important thing?
Well, I wouldn't even put him as a comic. I don't know. A motivational speaker.
Right. And then he goes on, didn't he go on Gavin's podcast?
Yeah.
And then he was like, I can kick any Trump supporter's ass in a debate. So I invited him on, but never took me up on the offer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So Captain Kirk, that's you and Walt. If he ever does come on our show, dude, I was thinking that would actually be huge.
I would love it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be the governor of Minnesota.
Former VP
super
candidate.
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Well, Yeah, and he might pick our show. It's a smaller show. You know, we're starting out. There's no reason to not come on. You know, like he doesn't. You could be you know, if you kind of play up the stupid card, act. You know, he thinks it's easy clips. You know, dude, I think it could work out. Let's get Waltz on.
And what's more fake folksy than coming on to the #1 grassroots podcast? We don't even have sponsors. It'd be fantastic,
dude. We could do fake folksy all day. We are all fake folksy. I like that. Yeah, let's do it up. But it does. What is interesting though is, and I think we've been talking about this for the past few episodes, but this Tim Walz thing and the Indivisible, it really shows the violent side to the left. But I think because the moderate side is so out of whack right now, that this is, I believe, the death of the Clintonian, Obama, Pelosi Democratic machine. And if anything showed that to me, it was Schumer this week going on The View. He looked like such a putz.
And what did he say on The View?
Well, I mean, how dare we not want the government involved in our business?
The Republican Party is a different kettle of fish than it used to be. And that's why we're fighting them so hard. They are controlled by a small group of wealthy, greedy people.
How dare we take credit for things that we've done?
And you know what their attitude is? I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? I don't want to pay taxes.
How dare we have some sort of agency without the approval of people who, you know, whatever, in Washington?
Or, I built my company with my bare hands. How dare your government tell me how I should treat my customers, my the land and water that I own, or my employees? They hate government. Government's a barrier to people.
He said all kinds of weird and stupid things that once he said them, I was like, I agree with everything. Like, I don't want the government involved in my business. I don't want the government involved in my life. You're not my parents. You're not my spiritual advisor. You're just to make sure that the Canadians don't invade. Give me a break. Like, what? He looks so dated.
And without the government, we wouldn't even survive. We wouldn't have roads. We might as well just be living in mud huts, if not for the wonderful federal government. And that,
yeah, for his benevolence.
Exactly. And he kind of gave up the game when it came to these town halls where a lot of people are yelling at Republican members of Congress that, yeah, that's astroturfed, fake grassroots effort on the part of the Democrats and the broader left-wing outrage machine.
We are mobilizing in New York. We have people going to the Republican districts and going after these Republicans who are voting for this and forcing them to either change their vote or face the consequences. This is a long, relentless fight that we fight every day. And I am confident that we will bring Trump's popularity, numbers, and strength down if we keep at it and keep at it and keep at it.
And you talk about the violence. We saw under Trump, 2020, the phony narrative around George Floyd. COVID leads to these BLM/Antifa riots. And when October 7th happened under Biden, there weren't those mass riots. There was some violence, some destruction, but it was contained. It was on a campus in Columbia, for example. But we didn't really see the kind of mass riots that we would see under Trump. And that's because under Trump, they knew that the riots made him look bad. He's not a keeper of the peace. He doesn't maintain law and order. And he lost in 2020. And they knew that these riots, if they were to occur under Biden after October 7th, would tank his chances of being reelected. Now we saw all the other factors that closed in on the Biden administration. He steps down. Kamala becomes the eventually losing candidate. But the left knows that, you know, going back to LBJ, the Summer of Love in '67, that was one of the major reasons he stepped down in March of '68, because there was so much chaos and other factors as well. Vietnam, for example. So they're going to uncork, I think, a lot of violence under the Trump administration in order to have that same narrative as 2020. Oh, you can't keep the peace. Look how violent the streets of America are. It's a pretty tried and true playbook.
Like Iran. Iran was given, billions of dollars by the Biden administration. And suddenly the Houthis are up and at them. Suddenly Hamas is up and at them. Suddenly Hezbollah is up and at them, right? So Iran was fused with money. So all these different, now suddenly they can give money to all these different groups. Well, the same thing has happened with these NGOs, where if they're going to give money to the NGOs, they're going to fund these sliver organizations who are organized. And that's why during the BLM protests, you had pallets of bricks show up places that made no sense. Why would there be bricks at places? You heard about that, right? I think I told you that story. My cousin in Kansas, in Emporia, Kansas, because you have Emporia University there. Well, they were going to protest because they're college kids, and that's what college kids do. They protest things. But they're all Kansas kids. I mean, they're all good Kansas, people. And so they're protesting, but everyone knows everyone. Everyone, the storefronts, everyone, your best buddy's father owns that, that garage over there, and what's his face cuts everybody's hair or whatever. So they're protesting, and pallets of bricks show up in this small town in Emporia, Kansas. Pallets of bricks. That's organized. That's infrastructure. Bricks are not cheap. And that's what the left, that's always been part of the left. As far as like the right and extreme right and racism and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. But the left has this dark, seedy part of it.
When folks tangentially on the right commit some sort of criminality, violence, what have you, they're prosecuted. They're tried and convicted and sent to, gulags that require...
As they should be.
As they should be. And we see with the left, as the activist that I played on last week's show intimated, she's worried that, Elon Musk said this and that I'm committing crime and that I'm scared of being arrested. But again, going back to the 60s, being arrested and then you get a slap on the wrist and you're bonded out and you can live your life. Being arrested is like a badge of honor for the left. It doesn't really affect their jobs.
It's romantic. It's romantic.
Yeah, exactly. So in line with this anti-Tesla protest, did you hear about the lawsuit involving Greenpeace at the Dakota Access Pipeline?
See, and that's when does protesting something and being against something, when does that become terrorism? Because that was the ruling of the court, right? Is that Greenpeace was actually doing terroristic things. I don't know.
No problem. It's called direct action. That's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge way to encourage and downplay the violence, but encourage the violent protesting. So Greenpeace, 2017, 2018, send all their goons to the Dakotas to protest this pipeline, and a lot of destruction occurred, roads were blocked, etc. So the contractor for the pipeline, I believe it's called Energy Transfer, filed suit against Greenpeace and won $600 million worth of damages. Now that will be wound down to a more understandable monetary damage in a 200 million maybe. But what it shows is that Energy Transfer, through emails and other means, text messages and the like, proved that, kind of like these Hamas protests at Columbia University and other campuses around the country, that it's really easy to funnel the violent protesters among the broader, more peaceful protesting. And then when they get in trouble, just say, oh yeah, those were a few bad apples, they weren't part of the larger group, etc. So I have this City Journal article by Jim Meigs. He's a former editor at Popular Mechanics. He's now a fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And he writes that Greenpeace supplied power tools, propane, tents, cold weather gear, and a van equipped with solar panels. Energy Transfer's lawyers particularly focused on the 20 or 30 lock boxes Greenpeace delivered to Standing Rock, which is a place where the protests were being held in the Dakotas. A lockbox, sometimes known as a sleeping dragon, is a sophisticated device that allows activists to chain themselves together to heavy equipment or to use each other while forming human blockades. They consist of heavy PVC or concrete tubes into which activists can lock their arms, making it impossible for police to separate or move them without special equipment. The lockboxes proved a major headache for law enforcement officers trying to remove protesters from highways and construction sites. One photo displayed at the trial showed a Greenpeace paid a trainer using a lockbox. When then Greenpeace director Annie Leonard received a text showing another demonstrator employing the device, she responded approvingly that the action, quote, ups the ante. As to explain that phrase in court, Leonard compared the protester with anti-segregation activist Rosa Parks. So I'm a curious man. I like to know things. I know these days it's not cool to know things. So I look up Annie Leonard. She went to Barnard College, affiliated with Columbia University.
Shut up. Every time.
Every
time, dude. So with the Democratic thoughts, what is your opinion on, in 2028, AOC and Bernie? Who wants some, huh?
Well, as we saw on ABC this week,
I am so impressed by her work in Congress and she inspires young people all over the country.
Jonathan Karl, who's not some extreme right-wing MAGA guy, he's a kind of a lefty figure, was interviewing Bernie Sanders, and he asked a very simple question.
Would you like to see her join in the Senate?
Would you like to see AOC in the Senate? And Bernie just couldn't handle it. Okay. I'm getting out of here. If you want to speak nonsense, you can speak nonsense. I'm not here for the horse race. And I'm thinking to myself, what horse race? What are you talking about? He was just asking if you wanted AOC in the Senate. Like, it's a pretty simple question. And he
because I don't know why he was so upset about it.
I don't know either. And a simple yes or no would have been fine. I think it's because, as we talked about briefly on the last episode, people want AOC to primary Chuck Schumer for his vote on the continuing resolution. And so I don't think he wanted to pick a fight going so far as to endorse a AOC primary against somebody who is the minority leader for the Democrats in the Senate. Because even though Bernie's an independent, he caucuses with the Democrats.
See, I think I know why he's upset.
Why is that?
Because this time around, who's gonna buy him out? You know what I mean? Like, if he runs again, the last two times he ran, the Clintons bought him out, right? So now if he runs this time, AOC can't buy him out, right? So who's gonna buy him out? So yeah, I think that's the reason why he's like, I don't want to run for president. Plus he's gonna be like, what, 97 years old? Like, how old is he?
He is at least 82 years old.
I am 83 years of age, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's going to be 4 years from now. So he's going to be 86.
Oh,
he's almost going to be 90. Like, I don't know. Well, you got AOC, who's like, what, 12?
Yeah.
That's just a very odd. It looks like, like you're taking grandpa to the movies, you know what I mean, with those two. That's weird.
Well, but all AOC wants is a Democrat Party that farts for the working class.
We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us too.
Is that what
She did say that.
Hey, you know what I mean? Party that farts hard.
We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us too.
Eric Swalwell was not available for comment.
The president used taxpayer dollars to ask the Ukrainians to help him cheat an election.
All right. So you were telling me before the show that you can tell me why the Supreme Court is going to support the district judges, right?
Correct.
Because for me, I don't see how they could possibly support that.
Because you're thinking rationally and logically. You're not understanding the realpolitik of the Supreme Court and its current composition. Sure, there are 6 Republican appointed justices on there, 3 Democrat. But who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? John Roberts, the Bush guy. He has taken Amy Coney Barrett under his wing. And so any decision that is made that hinders that worldview of pro-institution is a threat. And so I think Justice Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and the 3 liberals will side with these district court judges to protect, quote unquote, the institution of the court. And so I don't think anything short of actual impeachment is going to get the job done to tell these district court judges to knock it off and stop issuing nationwide injunctions when you are a district court judge, which is the lowest rung of the federal court. I was perusing a little bit of the news as far as Judge Jeb Boasberg's familial relationships. His sister advocates for illegal immigrants. His daughter does the same. And all the Reuters headlines, the AP, Newsweek, all had the same, oh, these judges' families are being threatened. Oh, threats, death threats. It's so terrible just for doing their jobs. And I'm thinking to myself, was this kind of reporting ever done in regard to Justice Kavanaugh, who literally had a crazed left-wing near assassin named Nick Roski travel across the country and stake out his home? Thank God he had a come to Jesus moment. His sister talked to him before he did anything stupid, but he came with like rope and a crowbar and duct tape and a firearm. And there was no, oh my goodness, we need to protect our Supreme Court judges. It was more like, well, what did he do to deserve someone coming to his home? Oh, he got rid of, and this was before the decision was even made. He was going to vote for overturning Roe v. Wade. Roski was upset because a preliminary ruling was released, given to Politico, funded by NGOs, in order to stir up a lot of anger. And Roski was the nut that traveled across the country and tried to kill him. Thankfully, he was caught before anything happened, but there was no sob stories, small violins playing, nothing of that nature. Or when Justice Alito's wife had the audacity to fly flags that the left-wing kooks didn't like, no one was like, oh, we need to tone down the rhetoric and ensure that these judges are protected and da-da-da. There's none of that. Nothing of that nature happened. It was, how dare the Alitos fly their flag? What, appeal to heaven? A flag that dates back to the Revolutionary War? The Gadsden flag? The American flag upside down? What are you talking about? You guys are crazy. But with these district judges, they get the, oh, their families are being threatened. It's for doing the right thing. How dare the right-wingers do this? And it's so tired and so boring. Anybody who's not already enthralled with left-wing mainstream media can see through it, that it's all an attempt to circle the wagons, so to speak, and ensure that these judges continue issuing nationwide injunctions against the authority they have as district court judges.
Yeah, I don't understand how a local judge can affect a national thing like that. But if it's held up by the law, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out.
And what's interesting about some of the legislation that Trump is using, they say, oh, it's a 1798 law. It's 227 years old. And how terrible of him to do that.
In 2010, liberal immigration expert Daniel Kanstrom detailed how entirely uncontroversial the Alien Enemy Act was when first enacted.
And that then turned into two or three laws that collectively are known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Aliens part of it had two pieces. One was the Alien Enemies Act, and the other was the Alien Friends Act. And the Alien Enemies Act was not very controversial. It essentially said if we are at war, then a native of that country is an alien enemy, and that person can be dealt with, essentially deported. The Aliens Friends Act was much more controversial, and that essentially gave the president the power unilaterally on his own to determine that a particular alien was a danger to the United States and to order that person deported. So that raised a lot of questions about the power of the president and the role of courts and the rule of law and the meaning of how much protection aliens would have in the United States as compared to citizens. And it was enforced pretty vigorously in some ways by some agents of the John Adams administration, in particular a man named Timothy Pickering, who was a very strong Federalist and a real enforcer.
Well, it was affirmed as legitimate, constitutional, non-reviewable from the judiciary back in the 40s. The same court that affirmed Korematsu, which made legal the internment of the Japanese, that same court affirmed a president's plenary power, which is the broad enumerated and unenumerated powers given to it by the courts and the Congress. The executive branch has that power. The commander-in-chief has that power.
We're speaking with Sean Davis, the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist. But what's interesting is there actually is no habeas petition. They are not challenging whether these people are individually being removed legally, saying they're citizens or they've not proven that they're not citizens. They've very deliberately not done that. Instead, they're making a facial attack on the law, demanding judicial review of it, when the Supreme Court already, in 1948, after World War II, declared that removal orders themselves are not judicially reviewable. So in this case, they're not doing the thing you would expect them to do if they're trying to protect the rights of the individuals being removed, and they're doing the very thing they're not allowed to do by facially challenging the authority of the president to remove these people at all.
And one of the things that blows my mind is that if this law was so terrible, if this law was so unnecessary, one question: why didn't Congress ever repeal it? The Democrats, after the Second World War, held the Congress for 40 years. As far as I can tell from my research, they never tried to repeal it. That would have been quick fix, just repeal the damn thing if it's so bad. But they didn't. Isn't that weird? I think that's a little weird that they're now complaining about the law that was on the books, has been on the books for 200 years, affirmed by the Supreme Court as legitimate.
Right.
And only now, because Evil Orange Man uses it, suddenly we're supposed to cry in our soup and, bemoan the fall of America.
Well, I think it's just because he used it.
Yeah. It's a cliche, but if Trump endorsed breathing, the Democrats would die of asphyxiation.
Yeah. If he uses a toilet, they'd outlaw toilets.
Right? They go back to throwing their waste out the windows. They would denounce the fascism of plumbing. You know who else had plumbing? That's right, Hitler.
That's hilarious. All right, well, so to wind up here, the JFK files came out. Anything new with that?
It turns out he was shot.
Yeah. Thanks for the heads up on that one.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
Also, unfortunately, George Foreman passed this week.
Oh, terrible loss.
Yeah.
Terrible loss.
He was a heck of a boxer.
Made some pretty good grills.
Yes, he did. And did you know this? Little known fact: George, he had 12 children, 5 sons, 7 daughters. His 5 sons are, now listen to this: George Jr., George III, George IV, George V, and George VI. They all have little nicknames that they have go with them, but these are all their actual names. So all 7 of his sons are named George. I named all my sons George, Edward, Foreman, so they would always have something in common. I say to them, if one of us goes up, then we all go up together. And if one goes down, then we all go down together.
Well, that's actually kind of sweet. That's a nice little...
So he'll be missed.
Yeah. Rest in peace, George. Foreman, the first. Anyway, thanks for listening to episode 20 of Notionally Accurate. Thank you to some guy named Jason for joining me on this one. I'm your host, Captain Kirk. More to come on future episodes. Find this podcast on SoundCloud, Rumble, and YouTube. Follow the podcast on Twitter /X at NotionallyACC. That's at NotionallyACC. Email me at notionallyaccurate@protonmail.com. That's notionallyaccurate@protonmail.com. Take care, and remember, even if you can't be factually correct, you can always be notionally accurate.